Hola, mi nombre es María Teresa González y soy gerente general en Chile de Statkraft, empresa de energías renovables del Estado noruego. Y quiero invitarlos especialmente a contar de este lunes 7 de diciembre a participar en la Semana del Cambio Climático 2020 organizada por la Gran Logia Amazónica de Chile. Creo profundamente que para heredar un mundo tal y cual lo conocemos hoy, o incluso mejor a nuestros hijos y a las futuras generaciones, debemos participar muy activamente en la reflexión en torno a la acción climática. Así que no se lo pierdan a partir del lunes 7 de diciembre.
Hola, buenas tardes. Soy Janina Franco, especialista senior de energía del Banco Mundial y quería expresarles mis agradecimientos por participar en este gran evento de la Semana del Clima de la Masonería de Chile y decirles lo importante que es tener estos espacios de diálogo y de conversación respecto a la transición energética que el país se va a encaminar. Y con eso los quiero invitar a que participen en la discusión. Muchas gracias y hasta luego.
Hola, buenos días a todas y a todos. Mariano Morazzo, aquí desde Roma. Un saludo a todos y anticipo que va a ser un gusto más tarde estar conversando de naturaleza, clima y energía y de nuestras acciones para disminuir nuestro impacto y mejorar nuestra relación con los ecosistemas. Buenos días a todos y hasta luego.
La Gran Logia de Chile es una institución laica, integrada por personas de espíritu libre. Su estructura fundamental se basa en un sistema educativo, tradicional y simbólico, realizado a través de un proceso de perfeccionamiento personal. Exalta la virtud y dignidad del ser humano, promoviendo la solidaridad y la justicia social, y establece puentes para enlazar el pensar, el decir, el sentir y el actuar en beneficio de la humanidad.
Hola, mi nombre es María Teresa González y soy gerenta general en Chile de Statkraft, empresa de energías renovables del Estado noruego. Y quiero invitarlos especialmente a contar de este lunes 7 de diciembre a participar en la Semana del Cambio Climático 2020 organizada por la Gran Logia Masónica de Chile. Creo profundamente que para heredar un mundo tal y cual lo conocemos hoy, o incluso mejor a nuestros hijos y a las futuras generaciones, debemos participar muy activamente en la reflexión en torno a la acción climática. Así que no se lo pierdan a partir del lunes 7 de diciembre.
Hola, buenas tardes. Soy Janina Franco, especialista senior de energía del Banco Mundial y quería expresarles mis agradecimientos por participar en este gran evento de la Semana del Clima de la Masonería de Chile y decirles lo importante que es tener estos espacios de diálogo y de conversación respecto a la transición energética que el país se va a encaminar. Y con eso los quiero invitar a que participen en la discusión. Muchas gracias y hasta luego.
Hola, buenos días a todas y a todos. Mariano Morazzo, aquí desde Roma. Un saludo a todos y anticipo que va a ser un gusto más tarde estar conversando de naturaleza, clima y energía y de nuestras acciones para disminuir nuestro impacto y mejorar nuestra relación con los ecosistemas. Buenos días a todos y hasta luego.
La Gran Logia de Chile es una institución laica, integrada por personas de espíritu libre. Su estructura fundamental se basa en un sistema educativo, tradicional y simbólico, realizado a través de un proceso de perfeccionamiento personal. Exalta la virtud y dignidad del ser humano, promoviendo la solidaridad y la justicia social, y establece puentes para enlazar el pensar, el decir, el sentir y el actuar en beneficio de la humanidad.
Hola, mi nombre es María Teresa González y soy gerente general en Chile de Statkraft, empresa de energías renovables del Estado noruego. Y quiero invitarlos especialmente a contar de este lunes 7 de diciembre a participar en la Semana del Cambio Climático 2020 organizada por la Gran Logia Masónica de Chile. Creo profundamente que para heredar un mundo tal y cual lo conocemos hoy, o incluso mejor a nuestros hijos y a las futuras generaciones, debemos participar muy activamente en la reflexión en torno a la acción climática. Así que no se lo pierdan a partir del lunes 7 de diciembre.
Hola, buenas tardes. Soy Janina Franco, especialista senior de energía del Banco Mundial y quería expresarles mis agradecimientos por participar en este gran evento de la Semana del Clima de la Masonería de Chile y decirles lo importante que es tener estos espacios de diálogo y de conversación respecto a la transición energética que el país se va a encaminar. Y con eso los quiero invitar a que participen en la discusión. Muchas gracias y hasta luego.
Hola, buenos días a todas y a todos. Mariano Morazzo, aquí desde Roma. Un saludo a todos y anticipo que va a ser un gusto más tarde estar conversando de naturaleza, clima y energía y de nuestras acciones para disminuir nuestro impacto y mejorar nuestra relación con los ecosistemas. Buenos días a todos y hasta luego.
La Gran Logia de Chile es una institución laica, integrada por personas de espíritu libre. Su estructura fundamental se basa en un sistema educativo, tradicional y simbólico, realizado a través de un proceso de perfeccionamiento personal. Exalta la virtud y dignidad del ser humano, promoviendo la solidaridad y la justicia social, y establece puentes para enlazar el pensar, el decir, el sentir y el actuar en beneficio de la humanidad.
Hola, mi nombre es María Teresa González y soy gerenta general en Chile de Statkraft, empresa de energías renovables del Estado noruego. Y quiero invitarlos especialmente a contar de este lunes 7 de diciembre a participar en la Semana del Cambio Climático 2020 organizada por la Gran Logia Masónica de Chile. Creo profundamente que para heredar un mundo tal y cual lo conocemos hoy, o incluso mejor a nuestros hijos y a las futuras generaciones, debemos participar muy activamente en la reflexión en torno a la acción climática. Así que no se lo pierdan a partir del lunes 7 de diciembre.
Hola, buenas tardes. Soy Janina Franco, especialista senior de energía del Banco Mundial, y quería expresarles mis agradecimientos por participar en este gran evento de la Semana del Clima de la Masonería de Chile y decirles lo importante que es tener estos espacios de diálogo y de conversación respecto a la transición energética que el país se va a encaminar. Y con eso los quiero invitar a que participen en la discusión. Muchas gracias y hasta luego.
Hola, buenos días a todas y a todos. Mariano Morazzo, aquí desde Roma. Un saludo a todos y anticipo que va a ser un gusto más tarde estar conversando de naturaleza, clima y energía y de nuestras acciones para disminuir nuestro impacto y mejorar nuestra relación con los ecosistemas. Buenos días a todos y hasta luego.
La Gran Logia de Chile es una institución laica, integrada por personas de espíritu libre. Su estructura fundamental se basa en un sistema educativo, tradicional y simbólico, realizado a través de un proceso de perfeccionamiento personal. Exalta la virtud y dignidad del ser humano, promoviendo la solidaridad y la justicia social, y establece puentes para enlazar el pensar, el decir, el sentir y el actuar en beneficio de la humanidad.
1, 2, 3. Estamos probando audio. Ya. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2. Estamos probando audio en la Semana del Clima de la Gran Logia de Chile. Hola, estamos haciendo pruebas de audio en la Semana del Clima de la Gran Logia de Chile. ¿Me callo ahora?
Hola, mi nombre es María Teresa González y soy gerente general en Chile de Statkraft, empresa de energías renovables del Estado noruego. Y quiero invitarlos especialmente a contar de este lunes 7 de diciembre a participar en la Semana del Cambio Climático 2020 organizada por la Gran Logia Masónica de Chile. Creo profundamente que para heredar un mundo tal y cual lo conocemos hoy, o incluso mejor a nuestros hijos y a las futuras generaciones, debemos participar muy activamente en la reflexión en torno a la acción climática. Así que no se lo pierdan a partir del lunes 7 de diciembre.
Hola, buenas tardes. Soy Janina Franco, especialista senior de energía del Banco Mundial, y quería expresarles mis agradecimientos por participar en este gran evento de la Semana del Clima de la Masonería de Chile y decirles lo importante que es tener estos espacios de diálogo y de conversación respecto a la transición energética que el país se va a encaminar. Y con eso los quiero invitar a que participen en la discusión. Muchas gracias y hasta luego.
Hola, buenos días a todas y a todos. Mariano Morazzo, aquí desde Roma. Un saludo a todos y anticipo que va a ser un gusto más tarde estar conversando de naturaleza, clima y energía y de nuestras acciones para disminuir nuestro impacto y mejorar nuestra relación con los ecosistemas. Buenos días a todos y hasta luego.
La Gran Logia de Chile es una institución laica, integrada por personas de espíritu libre. Su estructura fundamental se basa en un sistema educativo, tradicional y simbólico, realizado a través de un proceso de perfeccionamiento personal. Exalta la virtud y dignidad del ser humano, promoviendo la solidaridad y la justicia social, y establece puentes para enlazar el pensar, el decir, el sentir y el actuar en beneficio de la humanidad.
ya.
Hola, mi nombre es María Teresa González y soy gerente general en Chile de Statkraft, empresa de energías renovables del Estado noruego. Y quiero invitarlos especialmente a contar de este lunes 7 de diciembre a participar en la Semana del Cambio Climático 2020 organizada por la Gran Logia Masónica de Chile. Creo profundamente que para heredar un mundo tal y cual lo conocemos hoy, o incluso mejor a nuestros hijos y a las futuras generaciones, debemos participar muy activamente en la reflexión en torno a la acción climática. Así que no se lo pierdan a partir del lunes 7 de diciembre.
Hola, buenas tardes. Soy Janina Franco, especialista senior de energía del Banco Mundial, y quería expresarles mis agradecimientos por participar en este gran evento de la Semana del Clima de la Masonería de Chile y decirles lo importante que es tener estos espacios de diálogo y de conversación respecto a la transición energética que el país se va a encaminar. Y con eso los quiero invitar a que participen en la discusión. Muchas gracias y hasta luego.
La Gran Logia de Chile es una institución laica, integrada por personas de espíritu libre. Su estructura fundamental se basa en un sistema educativo, tradicional y simbólico, realizado a través de un proceso de perfeccionamiento personal. Exalta la virtud y dignidad del ser humano, promoviendo la solidaridad y la justicia social, y establece puentes para enlazar el pensar, el decir, el sentir y el actuar en beneficio de la humanidad.
Muy buenos días, muy buenos a todas y todos. Un especial saludo.
Good morning, everyone. A special greeting to everyone joining us, especially the Grandmaster of the Grand Lodge of Chile, Sebastian Jans Perez. We of the Paris Agreement. This event is framed by the ethical challenges of the crisis, the climate crisis worldwide, with a reflective outlook of masonry, and seeks to have an open space and with the context of this problem and highlighting the importance of these climate issues on a worldwide level. Each day of the Climate Week 2020 had a specific focus. For today, we will address the global ethical challenges focused on oceans and water resources. We want to offer elements for an ethical discussion, reviewing all the components and in the Los Rios region. I live in Los Rios region. I'm a member of the Commissions for Sustainability of the Grand Lodge of Chile. And today I will be your host and moderator of the panel we prepared for you today. Before beginning with the exposition, I will offer the microphone to the Grand Almoner of the Grand Lodge of Chile, who will offer us a greeting in their name.
En nombre de la Gran Logia de Chile, doy la más cordial y fraternal bienvenida a esta jornada con el panel Desafíos Globales del Cambio Climático, foco en océanos y recursos hídricos. El cambio climático, como fenómeno constatado, no solo pone en riesgo evidente a los ecosistemas, sino que también podemos vislumbrar que quebranta los cimientos de los derechos fundamentales, agrava la desigualdad y genera nuevas injusticias. La adaptación al cambio climático o las medidas de mitigación de sus efectos no es únicamente una cuestión científica y de voluntad política, sino que también es una cuestión ética. La contaminación, el cambio climático, la crisis hídrica, la destrucción de los ecosistemas o la sobreexplotación de los océanos y su privatización son temas que tienen especial relevancia si consideramos que en los últimos años Chile registra 118 conflictos socioambientales, 64 de ellos aún activos. Según fuente del Instituto Nacional de Derechos Humanos, la UNESCO en el año 2017 aprobó una declaración de principios éticos en relación con el cambio climático, como una contribución a los estados y a organizaciones relacionadas en la toma de decisiones y ejecución de políticas públicas vinculadas al desarrollo sostenible, de los que quiero destacar los principios de equidad y justicia y de solidaridad. Este último apunta a sostener individual y colectivamente a las personas y grupos más vulnerables al cambio climático y a las catástrofes naturales. Reforzar la cooperación, especialmente en el ámbito del intercambio de conocimientos, la transferencia de tecnologías y el aumento de capacidades, debiera ser parte de la solidaridad entre los estados. Por último, comparto la perspectiva desde la ética de la responsabilidad sostenida por Hans Jonas, en que el hombre actual ha de definir, orientar sus decisiones y acciones, consciente que sus efectos no solo pueden afectar al próximo presente, sino que también a las futuras generaciones y a estas como parte de la naturaleza futura. En nombre de la Gran Logia de Chile, sean todas y todos muy bienvenidos a este espacio fraterno y solidario de reflexión por el futuro, por el bien futuro de la humanidad y de la naturaleza que la cobija. Gracias. Sean todos y todas muy bienvenidos.
Muchas gracias, Gran Hospitalario, por vuestras palabras.
Thank you, Grand Hospital, for your words. And the challenge today, just by the Paris Agreement, has invited us to generate actions that, on an internal level, would allow the mitigation and adaptation to climate change, and the efforts. In a minute in mankind, not only the availability of water resources for mankind, but also the agreements that could be judged today as insufficient. We could say that the waters are a bit turbulent nowadays. So the pandemic challenged the ethical of the state, and you can see the actions for macroeconomic consequences and the need to respond to the needs of citizens in the same way as the most vulnerable territories should choose who in the family group should we favor with water for emotion medicine action, the prevention action that's considered essential to prevent coronavirus. And this panorama is quite adverse, but it's possible to face it. It seems necessary, nevertheless, that take actions, challenge the limits in order to provoke the international system. Hydrosphere deserves our priority attention from an ethical perspective, environmental and transdisciplinary, since conducts cannot be just attributed to nature, but to the anthropic action. Therefore, is as important as the effort and from the international community and the states forming it is the effort that we need to deploy human beings and the intermediate groups in society. Welcome to this effort by the Grand Lodge of Chile to bring the ethical character of climate action. Today is dedicated to oceans and water resources. In order to begin our panel, I would like to introduce Mr. Jose Eduardo Alatorre. Jose Eduardo is the officer of economical affairs of the Division of Sustainable Development and Human Settlements for the CEPAL since 2019, and working in the impact of climate change and the assessment and implementation of economical tools facing climate change.
De asistencia técnica y de fortalecimiento.
In tasks strengthening capabilities in different countries in Latin America and the Caribbean. Has different papers on the economy of climate change in the region.
Con la inversión extranjera directa y comercio.
Also worked with international commerce and international investment. He's an economist from the International Autonomous University of Mexico.
Por acompañarnos.
Thank you for joining us. So you can begin your presentation, challenges of climate change and the urgency of action for compliance on the Paris Agreement after a brief corporate video from your institution.
Son esenciales para la vida en el planeta.
Water resources are essential for life on planet and human activities, economical activities, social and cultural activities as well. Paradoxically, water is a scarce resource on a worldwide level, distributed heterogeneously between regions of countries, and Latin America and the Caribbean are not excluded from this diagnosis. The increase in temperature, median global temperature, affects the availability of water, which leads to an increase in demand. Giving solutions to the challenge of integrated resources in the context of climate change, it's fundamental. And the use of these resources for economical activities, for ecosystems, and is essential for this process of exploitation and the use of water for the population in several sectors, such as agricultural mining.
Cambiar nuestros patrones de producción.
Solutions aren't easy. We need to change our patterns for production, consumption. These are not minor issues, and we need to improve them. And we need to improve the coordination in governments and the different levels of government, increase the coherence of public policies and the alignment of incentives, such as to integrate the proportionate use of water and have considerations and answers with a social focus. It's an ethical challenge that we cannot really set aside. The solution is in all our hands.
Y es un placer estar participando en esta Semana del Clima. Muchas gracias a la Gran Logia por la invitación.
Thank you to the Grand Lodge for the invitation. I will share now my screen. And for a second, can you confirm if you can see here correctly? Can you see my screen?
Muchas gracias. Entonces comenzaré.
In this presentation, I will discuss the role of resources as a mechanism for transmission of climate change and the potential effect that have, because we can see that water resources are closely related to development with the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. With the breaches for economical and social systems. What's happening during this past years? What we are seeing is that temperature has been increasing during the past 5 years, has accelerated. We can see in this graph on the left side that the increase in temperature has a relatively constant trend.
Acelerándose el aumento de la
But during the past 5 years, it increased rapidly. And we expect that during the next few years, we'll have the warmest periods recorded, increasing temperature in 1.5. So we've seen that in these past few years, the emissions of effects have increased considerably, and the concentrations, despite this pandemic, are still increasing as well, and probably will be the highest in the last 3 million years. So we're seeing how this is doing by in a different pattern in precipitations, oceans, and extreme phenomena such as storms, hurricanes, floods, droughts, heat areas, the reduction of glaciers, and
es a través del agua.
The main effects of global warming can be seen in water, and it's important that to notice that this isn't new. As we can see on the left side, we can see for several territories in Latin America and the Caribbean, it's a reality. You can see areas in Mexico, areas in Colombia, in Venezuela, in Peru, Chile, Brazil, that have an important water stress. And in the International Panel for Resources estimated that by 2030, the water demand would overcome this offer in 40%, but the effects are being felt today. And in the graph today, we can see the production in hydroelectrics. We can see that the differences in the region have shown that the production of hydroelectricity has decreased during the last few years, since 2006 to 2016. And about 15% for the total of the region for the South Cone and Venezuela. Likewise, we can see that the glaciers in the region are experiencing significant reductions, and as we can see in the graph here, we have selected glaciers in the Andes region, and it's producing their ice mass, which has important consequences for the hydric safety of glaciers that depend on the seasonal ice and the energetic safety, since many of these are also used for the generation of hydroelectricity. We are also seeing the generation of a larger frequency of extreme meteorological events. We're seeing that the last extreme events in the region, in the Arctic, have been more frequent, and with the area in Central America. So we are seeing in this graph that the impact and the economical impact of the natural disasters, meteorological disasters for the Caribbean, and in the case of Dominica, Hurricane Maria had an impact of about 300% GDP for the Dominican Republic, and about 15% of GDP for Antigua and Barbuda. And if this becomes more intense, We can imagine that we will have losses of this magnitude more and more often. So imagine what it would mean to rebuild our economies after this type of impact. Obviously, the Central American region and the Caribbean region are the more affected and most vulnerable to these events. As we can see here, climate change endangers the different goals for sustainable development. You can see that the ODS wants to guarantee the availability of water and sustainability and access water treatment for everyone. And this is related to other goals for sustainable development. To put this an example, is related to the goals for development, radicalization of poverty, and the radicalization of hunger, considering that 71% of water in the region is used for agriculture. This is closely related to Goal 3, as Francisco mentioned a minute ago. Having availability of water to washing hands constantly is very important currently, especially in these times of pandemic, but it's also important to have water treatment to contain the diseases generated by vectors such as malaria, dengue, Zika, and other diseases that, given the change in precipitation patterns generated from the global warming, have extended in several regions and territories in the region. However, the ODS had already shown worrisome trends. Here we're seeing the different countries in the region and the average, regional average. Colors go from red to green, being red, the scarce advancement, and orange means that there's a lot of advancement missing, such as the yellow, and then green means that the goal was achieved. Let's see here the columns. We see that goal number 2, we don't really, for hunger, we don't really have a color in the region. We have important challenges here. We also see this with goal 3, talking about health. The region presents lots of challenges, and goal 6 talks about water and access to water and water treatment, presents steps back. So within the CEPAL, we have an analysis for the trends these goals are having and how they're doing currently. So we're seeing that in the case of water treatment, a goal goes in the right trend and is going to achieve the current trend. But 2 of the goals are currently stuck. We're seeing that we have more stuck objectives and objectives going backwards than goals in the right trend. Chief trends, which is 19. Why is this? This is mainly due to the scarce economical dynamism in the region during the last decade. We're seeing that the region was already doing poorly in terms of economical growth, and therefore the progress has been deaccelerated. We're seeing that the goals for water treatment and access to water treatment are very closely related to the level of incomes on a worldwide level. So the green globes here are the countries in the region, and what is showing this graph right here is that it's very important to have dynamic growth in order to close the social gaps. However, rapid growth is complicated in a region. In the context of Latin America, where we export particularly large and low technological intensity, this clashes with what we call the external gap. So the structure of our economies makes that we cannot really grow at high rates without risking getting into debt. In order to prevent this phenomenon, we need to provoke a change in our productive structure in such a way that we have less import demands and we diversify our exports. However, this growth also clashes with other restrictions, which are the environmental restrictions. We can see that a larger growth means a larger number of emissions. Here we have the GDP and the environment, the warehouse effect gases. There's a tight relationship here among these. with the GDP and the greenhouse effect. So every time our economies grow, and depending of our structures and given our productive structures and energy matrix and patterns for consumption and production, generating larger greenhouse effect gases. So what we are seeing now is that every time we grow, we demand more energy, and energy comes fundamentally from fossil sources, petrol, oil, carbon, coal, natural gas, and rarely from renewable energy fuels. So here, the patterns, consumption patterns, have an important role. And we are seeing that as the incomes increase, we also increase our demand for food with a larger hydric footprint, a larger carbon footprint. So we increase our demand for consumption of meat, for example, that has a very large water footprint and also a large carbon footprint, which in this highest part can generate up to 15 kilograms of CO2 per meat plate served. So same with lamb, and lamb also has an important water footprint. Pork has a very important carbon footprint as well. So we're seeing that their consumption patterns are also generating problems for sustainability. Actually, we're seeing that economical growth generates unsustainable patterns, and these patterns are not consistent with the Paris Agreement, which shows us that the need to look for new style for development. What we are seeing here, this graph shows our development on our global level, shows GDP per person per country. Each circle is a country, and colors show regions, and it shows that countries with higher GDPs, there's very few countries here with consistent emissions due to the goals established in the Paris Agreement. We see here environmental sustainability area is empty. The idea is that most countries in the medium and high incomes can move on from here, which are the green colors here, to this empty slot. However, there is not really an experience on a worldwide level that has achieved this. So we really need to innovate and think about a new style for development that would allow this. And the current style, the business as usual style, doesn't allow for it. So to wrap this up, what we are seeing in the region is that on one side, we are growing very little in order to achieve the social goals we have. The region is not generating the economical dynamism that would allow us to generate the employment and the resources necessary and the investment necessary in order to provide the necessary public services and good to improve the population's well-being. However, this growth, this necessary growth, clashes with our economical structure, with the growth and the external balance, and it's also too high to comply with the Paris Agreement. So we are seeing that the development options we have left are a set of very reduced options if we want to comply with the goals proposed in our society. These tensions in the different development has a restricted amount of policies for medium and long term that allow us to close the breaches, simultaneously achieving both the 2030 agenda and the Paris Agreement. So with the CEPAL, we identified a few sectors that would allow us to close these gaps, which are mainly the introduction, the transformation of the energy matrix based on renewable energies, distribution of basic services such as water and water treatment, urban urban development, technology development, manufacture for health economies, circular economy, sustainable tourism. I will give a few examples with the solid information and why we see that these areas have a high potential to close this gap simultaneously. Jose Eduardo, you have 3 minutes left. Perfect. Thank you very much, Francisco. We're seeing here that renewable energies have the ability of generating an important economical driving effect, and we can see that compared to fossil fuels. But in Chile, to generate a 74% of economical improvement based depending on the fossil fuels. So in the case of the United States, there's a 140% more employment compared to fossil fuels and a reduction in emissions in almost 100% for the region, generating lower costs in investments. We also have cases for, in the case of cattle, for electrical transportation and recycling. We are seeing that the production of clean energies is generating a lower water footprint, footprint. We're seeing here in the case of wind energy has a very low water footprint compared to the generation of electricity via fossil fuels. Here on this side, we're seeing the scale of this graph is logarithmic. So the gap here, is huge. For solar energies, there are improvements not only for carbonic footprint, but for hydric footprint as well. And to wrap up, we see that management for hydric resources is a challenge. Was a challenge before the climate change impact, but the climate change puts the need of managing water resources even better than we were before. And we also see that everything is related, and we need to relate the agendas, the hydric resources agendas, the climate agenda, the sustainable development agendas. We need to fulfill the Paris Agreement, and in these areas have gains both in the economical and the environmental sectors, social sectors as well. So we need to identify the areas or activities that would allow us to close the gaps simultaneously. And we are seeing last message. We're seeing that on a short, medium, and large term, the decisions that we're taking today will determine the progress and the possibility for future generations. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, José Eduardo.
Thank you very much, José Eduardo, for your interesting talk, especially for adjusting to the assigned time. We will begin now with our second guest, and he's Alex Munoz Wilson. Alex is the director for National Geographic Residencies for Latin America and has led the creation of the 7 sea reserves, completely protected, the largest ones we have in Latin America, with governments and local communities. And he also pushed the most significant changes to fishing legislation in Chile and organized the first postgraduate course in Latin America on transparency and anti-corruption in Latin America. So Alex was named Yale World Fellow by the University of Yale in 2018. He's a former lawyer from the University of Chile, a master in international law from the George Washington University. So dear Alex, thank you for joining us, and you can begin your presentation, the role of ocean for the climate balance of the planet, after a brief corporate video from your institution.
Well, thank you so much, Francisco. In first place, I want to thank sincerely to the Grand Lodge of Chile to invite me here and to also present you about the role of the ocean and in which we can share our evaluations and how people can help in these problems. So now I will share my presentation so as to show you some images.
Bien, yo trabajo en
Okay,
National
I
Geographic.
work for the National Geographic in the pristine seas, and they advocate to study and help to protect the last pristine places in the oceans of the world. And what we have seen right now is a travel that we did with Argentina and Chile to the Antarctica. And later on, I'm going to explain the importance of that travel. So I want to salute Marcelo Lepp as well. So this is images of one of the travel that we did to Mexico, and it reflects what is an ecosystem that is pristine. It has all the different change for the traffic change, and this you can have in this image you have medium, small species, and this is a functional clock. You have all the different species that are working just perfectly in an ecosystem that works just fine. And we hope that all the oceans in the world work at the same pace. Now we're seeing the Cabo de Hornos at the side of Chile in another expedition that we did and we are seeing that this is just amazing. We're seeing some beautiful and amazing algae, and they absorb a lot of CO2 at the same pace that the forests do. They are, you can see our divers that are doing some research in these parts so as to see what is underneath water. Now we are seeing this species, and I remember exactly when I was diving and I was really close and I could see that there were a lot, and they were in the Cape Horn, in that zone in the archipelago. The problem is that it's not an image that we can see in the ocean in Chile and in the world. We did this expedition like this one with different ships for fishing, and you let this mesh and you take all the kind of fishing. This is called dragon fishing, but this produces a lot of harm to the marine ecosystem. Now you're seeing a coral that was found by dragon fishing in this zone. And this happened in Chile and in a lot of places of the world where dragon fishing is authorized. Now we are seeing another traumatic image from the north of Chile. This was from the last year when some people saw a lot of dolphins eating. They eat this kind of fishes, and they still wanted to drag their mesh nets, and this happens very frequently. We also have an overexploitation problem. Around the 60% of the industries in the world are collapsed.
es una pesquería que captura entre 3 y 5 millones de toneladas al año.
This Peruvian industry catch a lot of anchovies per year, and they are used for fish flour.
Y con la población creciente en el mundo, que quizás llegará a superar los 9.000 millones de personas en el año 2050, nos vamos a tener que cuestionar
By 2050, we will have to question whether we can use this fish to feed other animals or to feed people, because these are fish that are very rich in protein, so it can be perfectly used for a larger human consumption. That is the reality of fishing. It's quite dramatic, and the fishing industry is so overexploited in Chile. It's really overexploited despite the efforts to manage and recover them. But 70% of fishing companies in Chile are overexploited or collapsed. So 9 out of 10 large fishes, and I mean large tuna, sharks, have disappeared, and we've extracted them from the sea. And especially sharks have been captured in order to sell their fins to the Asian markets, China, where they have shark fin soup, and sharks are the lions of the oceans. They're very important in the food chain, and they're disappearing. Here we have a very special photo. It has to do directly with climate change. Corals are disappearing, and this due to the bleaching phenomenon, especially due to the increase in temperatures. In the past, we had increasing temperatures every certain time, but now they're being more and more often, so corals cannot recover and they're dying. If we continue with the current trend, we estimate that by 2050, we will not have really corals in the world, and this is an important in habitats, same as algae. In these corals reefs, we have species they reproduce and protect and feed there. It's very delicate to have these habitats such as these. It has a direct relationship to climate change. Many people have thought that culture has the solution to overexploitation, but our experience in Chile has been really bad. We have a salmon industry that sells a large amount, exports a lot, about $5 million yearly, but this has had a very serious impact, sanitary and environmental impacts, and we haven't been able to solve this environmental impact. And this is an industry that uses a large amount of antibiotics per year, over 300,000 kilograms, and have a large amount of sea lice. Producers have been really, really responsible when abandoning farms, which is every time there is an economical farm. These are cages near Puerto Montt. And after the crisis for the Influenza virus that bankrupted many companies, and they just left the cages sitting there until today. And here in the sea bottom, where we should be able to see crabs, starfish, algae, corals. This is a dead area with no oxygen, lifeless. And a few really brutal conduct, such as killing sea lions. Sea lions come close to the cages. They make holes to extract the salmon, and we're having images shooting them, killing them with axes, hanging them. It's really sad, the reality of salmon culture situation here in Chile, salmon farming, and it has really caused very, very larger needs in the native people, the Yagan and the Kawis people, who have seen how these industries have installed in their territories without really consulting them, and they should have consulted them previously in order to authorize them or not. And this fishing industry is just went there and took over, and so there's a complicated relationship with our native tribes there. So going back to the clean ocean interest we are seeing here, we think that the ocean can recover if we do certain things. We prefer the creation of sea parks that have the ability of protecting biodiversity, maintaining the resiliency ability of the oceans facing environmental change. And the studies that we've done show that a protected ocean is more adaptable to climate change. So this is a way of taking care of it and facing the problems that we're having currently. So what is the other advantage with species for diversity within the reservation? But when the species reproduce and are more abundant, they leave the confines of the park, and that increases fishing productivity outside of the parks. So that eliminates the contradiction between protection and um, and economy. There's no contradictions. Actually, sea parks make sustainability possible in the fishing industry. We can keep fishing in a more sustainable manner in time if we care for certain areas. And in Chile, we have created a large amount of sea parks. In the last time, we worked with the different governments to create these parks in the ocean areas in the south of the country, in the Diego Ramirez Islands. Aside from our scientific activities, I want to highlight a few things that I believe are important. First of all, is a relationship to communities. These fishers are from Juan Fernandez, the Selke Island, which is very far away and not very well known in the Juan Archipelago. And we have worked closely with them so they can be owners of the seaport created there. It's important not to invade them and as an organization for territories, work with the communities so they can be the protagonist of the processes. And otherwise, it wouldn't be useful. Protection the services in the communities. And it's also important to distribute the power, which is one of the issues where we're having. Environmental problems are always also power problems. Views of entities and the powerful companies and entities facing the more unprotected communities. So it's important to get used to empowering communities so they can make the decisions. In this other picture, we see a glacier here in the Patagonia, and I don't know if you can see here, we went with tips of the Kawascar and Yagan communities. We're looking at a map of the old uses they had with the fishing areas, fishing corrals, and taboo areas where you could not enter, sacred areas, cemeteries, etc. And for the first time, we combined our scientific knowledge and our studies with National Geographic and with the traditional knowledge of the originary people. And we're still working with them, and we'll have the scientific report from that expedition to propose ways of protection for these fjords that are very, very threatened. Always caring for the priorities that these people have in this area. We're also working on a political level, as you see in the photo here with the former President Bachelet and Minister Geraldo Muñoz and Marcelo Luna in a meeting where we presented a proposition with the Juan Fernandez community and the proposal for the Cape Horn and the Ramirez parks, which ended up being the Ramirez park, basically because the fishing industry opposed to protecting Cape Horn. It was a really good meeting, and the president accepted the proposal. Finally, it's a photo that I like it a lot because it's an experience of collaboration with the other countries, neighboring countries, Chile, Argentina, scientists from the Chilean and Argentinian Antarctic Institutes on a ship from the Chilean Navy, and with the president, the head of the army, and then everyone collaborating for protecting the Antarctic Peninsula. Chile and Argentina have a proposal for the creation of a protected maritime area for the Antarctic Peninsula, and we are supporting it enthusiastically and putting our abilities to this position here. These are countries that about 50 years ago almost went to war for some islands in southern Chile, and now we're collaborating for the protection of the sea biodiversity. And I think this is key that we need for the future. To wrap up, I would like to think about the time that we are in and what should we do, we are in perfect storm. We have the influence of three crises: coronavirus, climate change, and the accelerated loss of biodiversity. There's over a million species that are threatened with extinction. And these three problems, these three crises, have a relationship, a broken relationship with nature, and we see what's the origin of a climate change issues. In the case of COVID, it's a disease that came from wild animals and passed on to human. And this was always happen when we have markets such as the market in Wuhan and what happened with coronavirus. But when we invade wild areas filled with the virus and fungi that can affect us. So we need to recover the relationship that we're having with nature, and we cannot keep growing on the responsible way that we've been doing so now, because that formula is simply going to repeat the errors and it's going to make the problems worse. If we want to prevent the next sanitary crisis, we want to mitigate climate change, we need to develop differently. We need to grow differently, because growth is not really a synonym for development. And we need to understand that. And the environment puts a very clear limit that we cannot go over.
Vemos una relación con la desigualdad.
In the case of environmental issues, we also see a relationship to inequality and problems such as contamination, deterioration of oceans is always affecting the poor communities first. So we need to make this connection between the care for the environment and the protection for the equality of the people. And we have in Chile areas, sacrifice areas such as Ventanas, Quintero, Coronel, Huasco, where we have an extraordinary high amount of contaminating companies placed in areas where the community is poorer, has less resources, and that's the only explanation to have these companies there, because these industries wouldn't be there if the communities were richer. So there's a strong relationship between environmental crisis and inequality and social crisis. We need to address that, and we will lead to more equality in our society. Lastly, I would like to reflect on our political activity in the broad sense that I've really missed during this past time debate, political debate that came not only from the different parties, but the civil society as well, where we are putting on the table the environmental issue, because there's a direct relationship between the green agenda and social justice. Therefore, I believe that an orienting access for our social activities, political activities, need to be how do we adapt to the limits imposed by nature? How do we grow in a way where we can correct our course and have a world, a planet that's sustainable in time? Because we're not doing it, and we need to incorporate it on every level: presidential, legislative, community, civil society, and the conversations that we need to have in terms of our environment. It's really important to make these issues important and place them on the table. We need to achieve a true revolution for the relationships. We need to have a transforming change in order to develop differently. And the current path we have will also it's only going to take us to worsening of the crisis. We need to acknowledge each other as equals, and we need to ensure the equality of all people facing these environmental problems. And nature, we need to address nature in a more respectful manner, because this is the best warranty that we have to protect diversity of species and adapt better to climate change and ensure food sources, water sources, and have an economical activity that is not really going into crisis due to a lack of resources, such as is happening now in the fishing industry and a few other industries. Special mention to the protection of the Arctic and the Antarctic and the continents, the ice continents, in order to protect them, because they have a very, very important role for climate moderation in countries and on our planet. So that's the message. We need to include this environmental variable in our discussions, and hopefully we can do our best to make sure it's always available in the discussions that we're going to have with the Constitutional Convention and the elections that we have coming up next year. So I will leave this up to here so we can have the opportunity to discuss it further. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you. Thank you, Alex, for your very interesting presentation, especially with the reflections and the thoughts that, as you said, will feed the Q&A at the end of the presentations. And I want to now give way to our third presenter, Marie-Laure Logenier, leading specialist in water resources for Latin America from the World Bank. And it's also a focus point on institutionality for management of water resources from the bank. It's an organization that for 5 years has managed integrated management of water resources, water management across borders, water for agriculture, and drinking water in rural areas. She started in France. She's an agricultural engineer with a master in public policies and agricultural economy, and another in management of water resources. Dear Marie-Laure, thank you for being with us today, and you can begin your presentation. Challenges for adaptation in the management of water resources after a brief corporate video from your institution.
You probably think of headlines about rising sea levels. And you're right. In every conceivable projection of our changing climate, water is the hidden variable that many don't consider. The world's driest regions will get drier under most climate change scenarios. Parts of Europe, South America, Africa, and especially Asia are facing reductions in runoff. Without action, this means potentially enormous effects on the available water. And many large urban places like Manila, Mumbai, and Mombasa are located in areas prone to flooding. Add in paved floodplains, deforestation, trash-clogged drains, and the flooding risk grows larger, especially in cities where millions of people live in slums. And don't forget that cities and industries run on water. Energy needs water. When water is scarce, businesses shut down and jobs disappear. And history shows that water scarcity causes conflict and migration. Under a business as usual scenario, water shortages will severely hamper growth, particularly in Africa, the Middle East, and Asia. But it doesn't have to be the case. With good policies and practices, many of these effects can be neutralised. We can't control how much rain falls, but we can control how water gets used and move towards a world of resilience in the face of a changing climate.
Buenos días a todos.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Francisco. I would like to thank you for inviting me to this event, to the Climate Week and the Climate Change Week. I'm going to begin my presentation, so I'm going to share my screen. There we go. So can you see my presentation? Yes? So I'm going to start. So my presentation is about the challenges of the adaptations of water and climate change. And so I'm going to start my presentation just to talk a little bit of what the World Bank does in these topics, okay? So, where the people in the world thinks about climate change as an increase of temperature, but in the reality is that they're going to change their lives through something that cannot be used in many cases. I don't know. I can't. I'm so sorry. I cannot go present my slides.
Quizás con el teclado, Marilor.
Maybe with a keyboard, Marilor? Yes, but I don't know. Okay, wait. I'm so sorry. So water. Water actually is a principal medium in which you can feel all the effects of climate change on people, on economy, and all the different ecosystems. And that means that that by boosting the quality of water must be the principal objective of any kind of strategy to improve the resilience to the climate change. And actually, if we don't enhance the policies in short run, the predictions of the World Bank is that we are going to have a 5 to 10% loss of the GDP growth in a global level. That is what is going to happen if we keep the current path. Then we have the expectancy to move forward at the World Bank, adopting different policies that will be better for the future. And that starts by understanding the problem that we are facing right now. Well, the World Bank, with the topic of water, we see world with hydrological security with three main pillars. We need to protect the water resources. We need to boost the water services that are, for example, the treatment of water, the drinking water in a more efficient way and equitable as well. And also, we need to work in order to construct climatic resilience and also to respond to different risks regarding climate and not climate risks. And that is something that we're going to talk a little bit further on in this presentation. So, what is the problem? The climate change is an additional challenge so as to get the hydric security. Science told us that climate change goes to transform the climate and all the hydrological cycle. The impacts and the general impacts are super evident, and in a vast part of the world is also affected by these problems. For example, the most warm climate will have an increase of water, in particular in the agriculture sector because of the evaporation. And the most also the most sort of wet climate is going to be also enlarged, and they're also related to the floods. We also know that the level of the sea is going to increase in the coastal regions where the vast majority of the urban centers are located. Also, we are going to see droughts frequently and more intense. We're going to see a soaring in those events. Water is going to be more contaminated by the lowering and also the enhancing in temperature. We're going to be a eutrophication in the water, and we are going to see as well problems of sedimentation of the lakes and rivers and the infrastructure of the lakes. And we are going to see as well the the different things regarding the water and also the uncertainties regarding this variable of water. Water is going also to be more complex in the future. That we also need to know that all the effects of the climate change are summed up to other effects that will put more pressure on the water resources of the world, that is growing population,
una población cada vez
a population that is more urbanized, and obviously the economic growth that will cause also pressure on this. In this presentation, I'm going to develop 2 points of that those that we have seen right now. I'm going to see what we're going to see the impact on the economic part, and also the inequality, the unequal distribution of water. Each of these impacts will have enormous effects, but they also have practical solutions that have been seen in some parts of the world. So the water scarcity and their impacts in the economic growth and security. Well, the models have shown us that there are many regions in the world that in the future will be even drier because of the effect of the climate change in a big part of Europe, South America, Asia, will be affected by a decreasing of the availability of water in the next 20 years. And without any intervention, that means that, well, if there's no interventions, if we don't change the current path, we understand that that situation will have adversities on the population located on that zones, but that the thing that people have not considered is that in these arid zones, they will have the impact will have on the economic growth and security, because we are in a globalized world. And how we are going to live in that scenario? The water scarcity is going to impact on the economic growth in Africa and Asia as well. In that scenario, if we don't change the way that we storage and manage water in general, the negative impacts on the economies and security in these parts of the world will have some side effects. They are already zones in which they already have problems, and they are also affected, and their economies are also affected by the climate change. But we have good news. With good policies, we think that with those effects can be difficult, and we obviously cannot count the amount of rainfall that we are going to have in 1 year, but this challenge in those countries with water scarcity, those are also countries that use water very insufficiently. So we need to motivate those to use water in a more conscious way, and to stop the water scarcity by enhancing technology as well. Now, another topic, the distribution of water in the different basins. In a world level, We have more than 310 basins that are in the borders, with 60% of the water resources that cover 50% of the world surface and concentrates 40% of the population, and that is without counting the 300 aquifers in the borders. So that means that the vast majority of people that are in the economic activities in the world depend and rely on the shared resources of the different countries. I want to highlight at the same time that just 2/3 of these basins in the borders have well, 2/3 of these basins have a small amount of the aquifers, and they have a framework for this. So that means that by sharing this water, they generate mechanisms to manage in a community way, more and more important in the future with the growth of the water stress. And that means also that it's going to be even more difficult. Why? Because the ability of water and the pollution is going to increase, and therefore we're going to see a tendency of an increasing in the conflicts of the countries to share water. And that is a topic that is quite difficult, but it is possible also to address this topic in a more efficient way with some examples that we're seeing on the planet Earth as well. Well, now what does the World Bank regarding the climate change and water? We are trying to do two big things, basically. We are trying to ensure that our water projects consider the dimension of climate change, and generally we're trying to help our customers to see the uncertainty of the future. And secondly, we are trying to ensure that water is considered in a conscious way with the agenda of the world, and that needs adaptation agendas, and also to have an intelligent culture regarding water and the management of risk, and so on and so forth. So we need to consider the water in the World Bank. That means new ways of working, I mean. We need to enhance and boost the water management that nowadays are not very well managed, and we need to see that world is changing, and that means that we are supporting our customers to adapt to this. First, to enhance resilience, we need to ensure that resilience is systematized in the availability of the resources in the systems as well. That by planning and also through the strengthening of the different institutions, and that is for that our customers can see all the management so as to fight them. And once our projects are finished, these countries can control and invest by themselves for the future, for a more resilient future. And now we are also trying to support the infrastructure development that is more resilient. that is mainly for enhancing the infrastructure, and those infrastructure can keep working and functioning under extreme conditions. The third place, we need to consider as well that the climate change in water requires new ways of thinking, and the objective, the goal nowadays is not to find a solution in a stationary climate, but to consider the climate risk so as to ensure that the water systems can be sustainable and resilient in the context of dynamic future for the climate that is uncertain. And also the circular economy, the green infrastructure, or the decision making under the uncertainty, just to plan all the infrastructure for the business. Finally, we are highlighting the deficiency, the energy deficiency, and we are trying also to support the generation of hydroelectric energy. And finally, we are the World Bank trying to measure all the co-benefits that have our projects of water in China. And we have goals, and each year, as you can see on that graph, we are reaching and getting to better results. In this year, we are foreseeing that 60% of the benefits of our projects of water will have or will be benefits for the climate, for the adaptation, or rather for mitigation. Is like a corporative objective that is actually really important to us. And with that, I conclude my presentation. Thank you so much. Thank you, Marie-Laure, for your very interesting presentation, for adjust to the time schedule. And now we are going to leave to our last speaker, Marcelo Lepe, that has been named by some of our prior speakers. He is the National Director of the Chilean Antarctic Institute, and since 2005 has worked for the Chilean Antarctic Institute. He has also worked in his study lines are paleontology and the connection of the Patagonian Antarctica. He has been linked to the research of the Antarctica by participating to different documentals of the CNC, and also for the renovation and development. He has also been invited to different congresses, and 2018 he has been selected as National Director of the Chilean Antarctic Institute, and he is now working on that. To those that are with us in Zoom, in the next few minutes, you can do your question, make your questions on the chat box. Dear Marcelo, thank you for being with us, and now you can begin your presentation. Thank you, Francisco, for the presentation and the introduction. I want to thank our Grandmaster Sebastián Jans and the colleagues that were presenting now,
I think they mentioned many of the things that I was going to say in my own presentation, so I will try to go into a more reflexive dimension regarding a problem that is affecting all of us as human beings. And I will share the presentation because I want to begin with something that I want to leave for later discussion. And please, can you confirm that you are seeing this perfectly? Okay, thank you. Well, I belong to an Orthodox institution. The Antarctic institution is in charge of innovation, augmentation of science, and administers a national program for Antarctic sciences that gathers about 100 projects in scientific research in Antarctica. As Alex mentioned, we're participating actively in lots of initiatives, and one of the most important that I will mention now is the creation of the protected maritime area along with Argentina in the Antarctic Treaty. And it's a very special area and responds a little bit to some of the questions that I will mention in the presentation. I want to begin with something that not many people know, and it's that the concentration of CO2 that we are reaching today, and we see the information right here, it's not really updated. It has 400 ppm, and I invite you to download this book that's called Climate Changing Numbers. I'm promoting it a bit. It's a book that has on every book, every page is backed up by scientific papers, high quality scientific information for anyone who would like to go deeper into this topic. But there's something that's very important to consider and to think about. We are going over the 400 ppm in atmospheric CO2 concentrations. And this means, well, this means several things. When was the last time that the planet went through these levels of ppm? And that was around the Pliocene, about 3 million years ago. During the Pliocene, there were no human beings, no Homo sapiens or species appeared a little bit later. And the oldest fossil registers of human beings, this is one of the papers published in the article, it's one of the oldest, and it's relatively recent as well, belong to fossils in Morocco, and they're not as old. So give or get a mistake, a range of mistakes in the years, but they're not as old as these levels. We're not reaching these amounts. We registered for the first time such a concentration. And this really has many implications for us as mankind. It's the first time that we are going over this threshold as human beings. So whatever comes from now on are really uncharted paths, uncharted waters that we need to analyze in light of the evidence of the historical records, and Antarctica is being fundamental for that today. Fundamental because today in Antarctica we have managed to drill ice and sediment testimonies with really old, 2 million years, but in ice they have little bubbles from the past atmosphere, and every year there's amount of precipitation, and which is the driest continent in the world. It rains the least. So these bubbles are captured in the snow layers, and it's compact, it becomes ice. So this ice can recover through ice blocks that allow us to rebuild the climate on the past based on the atmospheric composition. So thanks to that, we have curves with the integration in the past, and we're also extending these records to the dinosaur era thanks to the perforation of the sea bottoms with sediments. And these are obtained via a great project, and this is the publication, the paper backing this up. I want to show you, if you see here on my YouTube link, Here on the bottom, on the right, we see the last peak, and it's shown here with a dotted line, the 400 ppm. In the time in natural history, the last time we went over this threshold, where planet is configured without us as players. So our ancestors from the Hominidae family were probably there, but we were. And nowadays, we would be reaching the second peak. And this is very important because it has several connotations. And one of the things that makes us think about the models that are being built in the intergovernmental panels for climate change is temperatures on the sea here in this curve here are correlated to the CO2 estimations. So the reconstruction that we've done through several proxies, this is how we call it base data, for the calculation of the increase of the global temperature. This establishes lots of really interesting things, among them that the variation of the sea level shows that we could have been in a scenario of a world with 400 ppm with the sea level over 20 meters current sea level. So our projections regarding what is going to happen during the next 100 years might be quite moderated related to what could actually happen. So another point that I'm going to mention is what we found regarding methane hydrates in the sea bottom. This is one of the projects, Andrill, but as you see here, there's a graph that shows the ice drillings that we're doing, really interesting ones that we're doing nowadays, and the sediment drillings. Here the ice ones are marked in green, and these others in purple, and it shows precisely the worldwide interest in this multi-million dollar project in order to achieve a prediction of what will happen in the future. So the predictive power of an annual scale or pilot scale is very important to build these scenarios for the future. So this shows that during the Miocene, about 23 to 11 million years ago, the concentrations of CO2 were about 280 and 500 ppm, but the levels in the sea show quite a big variation, and we will see also that they were in the range between 5 and 20 meters. So the effort Chile is doing now, we see the subglacier, the 6th area here in green, and here this is located in the base of the Antarctic Peninsula, and there's this line here. The Center for Scientific Studies for Bolivia has been drilling along with the British Antarctic Survey this subglacier lake that was found a few years ago, the publication. It's relatively recent, and there's an effort during the first few years to drill and reach the subglacier lake in a joint effort between Great Britain and Chile, and of course places these ice witnesses as an interesting part of how the Antarctic Peninsula has evolved during the past climate change area. So here's a reconstruction according to what we can understand of the iceless Antarctica about 2.6 to 5.3 million years ago. So that's the last time that we went over these reports. I invite you to revisit here this on the EPICA website with the ice that I showed 2 slides ago. But this average of temperature was 2 degrees Celsius higher than currently. And look at our affirmation. So the range of temperature that we are seeing here at the IPCC, we are putting as a limit at 1.5 degrees that we are not really, and fingers crossed for 1.7, so we can prevent this point of inflection, this trigger of other phenomena that we cannot really understand fully. And the ocean levels fluctuate between 10 and 20 levels higher than the current levels. This is published, it's an article for 2016, it's ratified by a 2020 article. So in another dimension regarding the relationship of our country with Antarctica, well, to begin and mention something that was already mentioned, Chile has 7 of the characteristics of vulnerability, of the 9 characteristics of vulnerability defined by the UN. Low coastlines, deserts, propension to natural disasters, drought, desertification, atmospherical urban contamination, and fragile systems. So we are really hitting the jackpot here. So this is something that has really caught our attention. And when I explain this, I like to make an initial reflection. And it's for at least 3 decades, we've known that the Atacama Desert, the driest desert in the world, was originated about 23 million years ago. And it was originated because in the area facing what we call the Atacama or the southern Peru, what happens now is a surge of cold sea current, the Humboldt current that was formed from the Arctic area, and it shows a really strong superficial cold in this area, and that has prevented for about 23 million years the formation of superficial evaporation of the ocean, and which was an important source of precipitation to the interior. So once we cut this precipitation circuit to the interior, it becomes a desert, and it becomes the driest desert in the world. So this is exactly as old as the dry valleys in the Antarctica, which are the other deserts in the world. So Atacama and the dry valleys are the driest and oldest deserts in the world. And this is quite interesting because this effect that conditions the existence of the driest desert in the world in a territory is a direct consequence of the existence of the polar current about 30 million years ago. So the natural and logical questions is what are the effects today of this current and everything associated to it, the atmospheric oceanic systems that depend on it. So one of the interesting elements that happen, and I'm saying interesting to say in a pleasant way, is what happens in March 2015. Storms and rain were concentrated in 24 hours, equivalent to 7 years of rains in Atacama, and most of them fell within 12 hours and caused flooding in important parts of the cities in the north. Part of the north, small and large northland, caused the death of 9 people and hundreds of thousands of millions of dollars in losses that cannot be quantified yet due to very old areas in the higher areas, there are zones that contaminated the rivers. So secondly, in the central area of Chile, have fires, epic fires during the last couple of years, and that has echoed through the other side of the Pacific Ocean. In Australia also is under the influx of these heat waves that have caused very important fires. Both events would be connected to something that's happening in the Antarctica, and it's happening in one of the most biodiverse areas in the planet, which is the coastline, and the Nawabuta coastline that have been defined as one of the 35 places in the world when there is an active loss of biodiversity. So finally, it's one of the most evident measures of climate change, and it would be the vanishing of glaciers and the loss of mass in the Patagonia glaciers. And this is one of the most evident that we are seeing when we go to the national park in Paine, and how this glacier is, the Great Glacier is going back, is closest to Bali. So these events that have been recurrent have also echo on the Antarctic continent. Well, here we have a phenomenon that for me was a revelation a few decades ago, and was originally announced by Mr. von Humboldt, who did an extraordinary interpretation of the latitude variation. So what we are showing here today, the south here, this year, and what it shows is the average annual temperatures, and it shows that in the Ecuador, there's temperature that's close to 35 degrees, and as we move south, this average temperature drops until we reach 0, and this means that sea level we should have then ice. So this explains the existence of Antarctica. Ice is concentrated in this area, and in this area here is the Arctic. Well, so what happens in natural history once we've had global warming? Global warming here, this is an extreme hothouse with a temperature average of 13 degrees Celsius on the poles, so over zero here we have. And other global cooling phenomena with a drop of temperatures of over less of 50 degrees Celsius of temperature. So look at this and look how in the Arctic and the Antarctica, these temperatures are larger in any of the scenarios for climate change. And here in the Ecuador is where they are more constant. This has been recently demonstrated, and it's the phenomenon of polar amplification. Polar amplification then implies that today, the places in the planet that are warming up the fastest and have a higher temperature difference compared to the average in the previous years are the polar region, and that's where we can establish a gradient towards the equator, where it's decreasing. So we have the obligation of understanding this better than how we've understood it so far. This is the polar current and its tentacles, which are the current around the world, and it shows that they are capable of modifying and regulating the worldwide climate through this ocean circulation. And we don't really know much about it today, but we're studying it intensely. And this is a Humboldt current that keeps our coastline quite cold relatively compared to other latitudes, similar latitudes in the world. We're seeing here the Gulf current that goes up to the Mexico Gulf, and it heats the northern seas and allows, for example, Scotland, which is about the same latitude of Cape Horn, maintains a higher temperature. So what is important about this, it shows that Chile, the closest region to Antarctica along with Argentina, have a huge dependence on what is happening in Antarctica. And the events of fire and dispersion of glaciers in southern Chile and the high mountain range and the intense rains that I showed in north would be related to events happening in real time in the Antarctica. Marcelo, you have 3 minutes left. All right, I will wrap up. And well, it's I already affirmed this, and this is one of the regions from the event that we had in 2015. Registered then these unusual temperatures in the Antarctica in March of 17.5 degrees in Argentina, side of the peninsula, and a few days later, this floods happened in the Atacama region. If you remember what happened at the beginning of this winter, there is an anti-cyclone in the north of the peninsula, and the place moved the storms. Everyone thought that the mega drought of over 3 years was past, but really this was not the cause. It was due to this anti-cyclone that provoked an unusual good time in the Antarctica, and it prevented rain and snow for many years, many days. And that conditioned then the existence of some rains in the central area in Chile. So what happens in the Antarctic Peninsula is affecting then the Chilean territory in real time. This is the paper from Rondanelli and collaborators that shows these precipitation events in northern Chile, correlated then to these extreme temperatures that are showing a great variation. So the polar amplification phenomenon that shows that from the 1980s is affecting different areas in the planet, and it shows a larger concentration of the red area towards the high latitudes, particularly the Arctic. The same way, the acidification of oceans, the acidification is closely related to the increase in temperature and with the capability of solubility of CO2 in water, and it's showing an intensity towards the higher latitudes in the Arctic and Antarctic regions that are leading to a level of acidity in the oceans that would have only been found in a natural registry about 300 million years ago. So this is including the proliferation of foreign species with these new conditions in the Antarctica that are more optimal for other species that hadn't lived in Antarctica before and bringing them here. So we're making a great effort to prevent the introduction of different animal and plant species to the Antarctica that could compete with the native species and degrade, for example, some crab species that are not really native to the Arctic, and they have arrived there and they're huge predators. So krill is also moving in circles south, down south, and that implies an echo in all the food chain in the Antarctic Peninsula. Such as, for example, one of the indicators, more charismatic indicators, penguins, are varying its distribution and abundance, and this is due to the existence here of the ice blocks and the microalgae associated to ice, which are their prepared food by several of the krills, the ages. So one of the threats that we haven't really assessed much and could be really important for methane hydrates. We know that methane is quite an aggressive greenhouse gas, and it has provoked in the past for temperatures to increase rapidly in a short period of time, and it has a medium life shorter than CO2, but we don't really know. We haven't really been able to quantify completely the methane deposits that could be freed quickly from the sea bottoms if there was a change in temperature. So on the effort of protected sea life, that was already mentioned. And finally, I want to invite you to think about how Antarctica today, thanks to this circulation effect around the world, is the beating heart of the world. It's the only continent that expands its size in winter, and we see that it, we see that the pattern within a decade. We can see that in a way it beats this continent. Has the most powerful currents in the world and strongly impacts distant regions in the planet, and we should understand it today as the heart of the planet in a rather poetic fashion. I want to finish my presentation with this, and of course, I've presented very ideas that would be really interesting to discuss during the Q&A session. Thank you very much. Thank you, dear Marcelo, for this really, really interesting presentation. Antarctica is a territory that's often unknown. So statistics and the thoughts that you've shared that will surely feed the interest of people participating in this activity. And as I mentioned, you can ask your questions. And those visiting us via Zoom can use the app chat directed to the moderator, Francisco Fonsalida. You can look in the channel. You can look for the moderator, and you can ask him your questions. So quickly, because we have already a few questions for Jose Eduardo. There's one asking about the ethical challenge of the new development model that we need to build. Please, briefly, Jose Eduardo.
Thank you so much, Francisco. Well, I think that the tendency of the different development partners are reducing the poverty, the access of the education has improved, the basic services have also been boosted. So we have seen some improvements in the world, but this it means a great cost. because what we have been adapting systematically have been affected in a negative way. So we ask what is going to happen to the next generation. So the answer is to change the rentability of the things that we are doing right now. So what need to abolish is the things that are going to affect our climate and our environment, but that also promote a good and great environment. So one of the ways of doing that is to generate and enhance the services and goods of quality that imply more resilient to the most vulnerable population for the next generations. Thank you, Jose Eduardo, for that answer. So now we're going to move forward to another question to Alex Munoz. They're asking if you think that it is possible to adapt this adapted strategy of our water resources in order to affect the climate change. Alex, please. Well, about the water resources and the marine ecosystems are affected by the climate change, and also because of the is affecting different species of the world, corals, for example, crabs, to say some. It is an additional problem, actually. And first, I think that it's important to secure that a vast part of the ocean is secured, and we have proposed that at least 30% of the planet, and that covers the oceans as well, that need to be protected areas, and that this is managed in a conscious way. So that consider different factors that allow that this can be renewable and sustainable. So that is something that can be done in a scientific way. Actually, Chile has seen this, but I think that giving the tools to the different institutions, to the humanity, to control how they are taking the decisions. Despite that we have these advancements, some kind of fishes are being exploited in a very, very high way. So we need to control that. And also we need to move forward in energy issues. And also the vast majority of population is located in the south region of Chile, but we need to move forward in the protected areas in the continent, and also to enhance and improve the way of thinking of the consumers. For example, in a restaurant, some species can be so overexploited, like merluza, for example. So if we have a better management of the different institutions over those species, we will help to the conservation of the different species. Thank you, Alex, for that answer. Now we're going to go to the next question, principally for Marie-Laure or Marcelo as well. What proportion of the changes are related to the nature cycles, and what kind of impact will be related to the human activity? Marie-Laure, you can answer this one.
Tienes que activar tu audio,
Marie-Laure, you have to mute yourself.
Me escuchan ahora, ¿verdad?
Now you hear me, right? Well, I don't know exactly what is the percentage that is contributed to the human activity or the nature cycles, but it's actually quite clear that human activity, because we are more and more regarding our population, we have a way of living that demands the use of raw materials, and the impact of the human being over the climate change and the degradation of the raw materials and the water resources as well is something very, very important, is actually a very big part of that. And I think that everybody plays a pivotal role so as to address this problem, and each of us, but it's also something that needs to be changed at policy level in each country, and all the international institutions like the World Bank plays also a pivotal role to share information, to get to the attention to the people, but also the countries that are their principal clients, to change all the public policies and also to enhance sustainability of the water resources and all the natural resources. And I would say that we need to recognize that water is a type of human right, and the access to water of quality, the quality water must be or should be like a human right. And in this sense, we need to consider the link between us, human beings, and the nature itself. Thank you, Marilor, for that answer. Marcelo, to wrap up. Okay, so this is one of the most important discussion of the current times. I think that has been very clear. 98% of the scientific research show that the climate change is having a crucial impact on the quality of life. I think that between 2013, we have an important number that show that there are nature causes of impact in the climate change. We are living on a period that is sort of warm, where we have 4 glacier cycles, and in the intercycles we have this frozen times sort of, and we are seeing the curve of behavior without any human beings, and that is actually quite interesting. But because prior the industrial area, we can see how the curve is soaring, so therefore we can see that nowadays we are upper in the difference that compared to the different cycles that we have lived with the um, growing in the different greenhouse effect gases, I mean. So thank you so much, Marcelo. Now we're going to have the last question to Alex Munoz, and the question is the following. The hydrological resources are the ones that are threat in the world. In the case of Chile, how can you work with the agriculture and the protection of the fauna? Okay, I have been working for many years in scientific path, because you have to remember I'm also a lawyer, and the impacts of this is actually very severe, and you cannot link these two with the species that are also native from or local to one part of the world. these studies of the different local species like robalo that we have catch, and we have opened their stomach, and they have pellets on their stomachs of fish. So those are kept in different nets. And these species are introduced, and they are being cultivated in Chile because the oceans of Chile look similar to the ones that are in Canada or Australia. And what is going on?
They escape, they predate over native species, or they compete over food with them, and this has been quite serious. That they also transmitting diseases. I also remember a study that we had in the Water River a few years ago, where we went with scientists from the University of Victoria in Canada regarding invasive species. And we went through different populations looking for active native species, and there are 46 described in Chilean rivers, and we couldn't find any, only trout and salmon. All the rest have been predated. These are infected rivers. So there's not really a compatibility between salmon farming and nature culture. So this is the logic of privileging this. It happens with many other areas, but with salmon farming, it's very evident. And it has never been proven that salmon farming in Chile is sustainable. Thank you very much, Alex. Truthfully, we still have a lot to think about for every one of us. And we would like to finish this panel, this question panel. And before we conclude, and in name of the Grand Lodge of Chile and the Commission of Sustainability and Climate Change, we want to thank you, our speakers, for their really interesting contributions and answers. Thank you, Jose Eduardo, Marilor, Alex, and Marcelo. And thank you very much to those who integrated this connection. Finally, we want to invite you tomorrow, Thursday, 10 from 10 a.m. And we will go over the global ethical challenges of climate change, placed on the focus on human rights and the social agenda in climate policies. So a large hug to everyone, and let's meet again soon. Thank you and good day.
Sí, acá estoy. ¿Te muteaste en Zoom? ¿Te muteaste en Zoom?